Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Tech Community Live. We have a great next session today with some amazing panelists to talk about cross-platform management with Microsoft Intune. I'll let them introduce themselves. Charlotte?
Yes. Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Charlotte. I'm a PM on the Intune Android team, so I support the Android area and any questions around Android. I'll pass it along to Iris now.
Thank you, Susan and Charlotte. Hi, I'm Iris Yuning Ye. I'm a product manager on the Apple Intune team. So I work on all of the Apple features and really excited to be on this panel talking about AMA and hearing what you care about for the coming Apple features. And I will pass on to Neil.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm Neil. I'm part of our customer experience team, so I'm a PM, and I sit in between our glorious engineering team and our customers and try and figure out what we're doing, what's working, what isn't working, and how we can, do things in the future.
Awesome. Today, if you have questions, we are taking them at aka.ms/AMA/IntuneCrossPlat. It is across the bottom of the screen. Our first question we have from Fernando on the community. Is there something on the roadmap to have the same container functionality on Windows devices that is the same protection offered for a BYOD, Android, and iOS working on a Windows device, like a Surface, for example?
I'm not sure we're the right audience unless we've misunderstood the question. So none of us work on the Windows team, so I don't know we can we can offer a question for that. I do know we looked at MAM for Mac, and we spent quite a while. That was very difficult for us to do, and I do know that we're introducing MAM for Edge on Windows, so that's already out, and there's work there to do that on Mac too. Well, obviously we already have MAM for iOS and Android, and we've got Work Profile on Android too. So.
Awesome, thank you, Neil. Next up from the tech community, troubleshooting tips for macOS. How do you check if the Intune MDM agent is causing high CPU usage for a long time? Where are the lines in the logs that tell that? Neil, can I start that with you?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. So the logs won't really tell you this. You need the performance data. So we need like process and performance data from the machine. One of the great tools I've been using from the community lately to help me with this is a tool from Gil Norton called Intune Logwatch. So it's not a Microsoft tool, it's a community tool, and it helps you parse the logs, which has been absolutely excellent. It's a really, really helpful tool. But if you want to see high CPU usage, you need to get the process data back from there. So the way we do that in the field with customers is we use a custom attribute script for that. So it kind of runs and we look at the CPU load, and then we pull that data back and then pass it within Intune. So you can do it all within Intune. It just takes a little bit of extra work.
Awesome.
Oh, and raise support cases, but if you are seeing this, then open support cases so that we can track them and engineering can see. Obviously, sidecar agent should not be taking high CPU usage.
Thank you, Neil. It looks like we have another Mac question from Stefan on the tech community. Is there a way to force macOS to upgrade during or right after the enrollment to the targeted minor version so that the device is updated sooner?
Yeah, I can talk about that one. Well, first of all, we fully recognize the need for the latest OS update. So for the existing features, we already have the DDN OS update available. So that is something you can 100% leverage on, because with that new feature, just one simple setting in the Intune admin portal, you'll be able to force the update, which is during the usage, which is the post-enrollment. And in the meantime, we're working on to get the enforce update during enrollment. It's a in development feature we're working on. So stay tuned for that. and we will release the information to you as soon as we got it. But I just want to reiterate that we fully recognize this need, and we're working on this feature.
Awesome. Another one for you, I think, Iris. How can we migrate management of macOS devices from other platforms to Intune?
Oh, yeah. I think this is a really great one. We are happy to hear that you want to migrate to Intune, first of all. And I will also let Neil to add more. So if the device is above the 26th, the OS 26, then there's a new Apple official supporting is for migration. And we already have the a blog sent out to the community about a month ago. So take a look at that blog of how to leverage the new Apple migration feature, which mainly that you have to have your device in the Apple Business Manager to make sure that you can leverage on that feature. And on the other hand, we also have both Neo has the script for migration. We also have some MVP scripts that you can leverage on the migrating for the devices below 26. And Neil, anything you want to add on this?
Yeah, just to add that it's great that people are asking the question and are wanting to migrate their Macs over to us. We've put a huge amount of effort into Mac development, so it's really cool. But yeah, as Iris said, we've got a lot of options. Apple have done a great job with macOS 26, so we can do that in place now. But we do have a bunch of scripts and things that help you with older versions. Migration of Mac is a complicated beast, like any desktop operating system. When you're migrating, from one to another, there's a lot to consider there, and we're learning as we go through with our customers. So, but yeah, keep an eye on the community, the LinkedIn community that we have. There's always lots of discussion about migrations there, and the GitHub repo that we have, which has that sample. And again, you'll see issues and discussion threads there where people are always trying to solve things in their environment. So yeah, there's a lot to learn there for migrations. It's quite cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Iris. From our next question comes from X. For publishing internal apps to Android, are there any best practices? Great
Question. I'll take that one. So usually companies upload their apps and manage Google Play, and your Google Play account will have an account ID that will allow you to target your internal apps only to your tenant and not publish them broadly on Manage Google Play or on Google Play, but have it specifically targeted for your company. So once you have that account ID, you can upload it and have it targeted to your company only, have an internal app, and then deploy the app through Intune onto your company devices. Yeah.
Awesome. Neil, do you have anything, or Iris, you want to add on any of that?
I was just going to say that's often one of the stumbling points we see with customers trying to get their LOB apps. The move from Google and Apple and having these kind of managed stores got rid of a whole bunch of issues for us in this space. But as soon as you bring LOB apps in, especially with development cycles and release branches and these kinds of things, it's one of the toughest areas to get right. So yeah, it's a common question.
Awesome. Thanks, Neil. So our next question is there a way that IT can enroll a corporate macOS device and then the user uses that device to do platform SSO registration?
Shall I take this, Iris, or do you want?
Sure, yeah.
Can do this.
Go for it. I can add more later.
So platform single sign-on is great. First of all, it allows us to get single sign-on to Entra, but that's not the most important thing about it. The most important thing for me is the security it brings. So that those credentials and the the identity attributes that we store are now in the secure enclave. So it's very difficult to get at those attributes and to for them to be misused. So there's a huge security benefit here too, and also it supports the fishless MFA. So we can have a different password to the Entra identity, and it means the end user never really knows the Entra credential at all, right? So they can use tap codes and things like that to get the device enrolled. This question about IT enrolling the device and then the user that will use the device can do the platform SSO registration. And I think in theory you could do this, but you would end up with the device in a really weird state. I'm not sure we would be supported. So you could enroll the device and then have the end user to complete the platform single sign-on registration. But the thing we see most often, and I think the thing to aim for here, is to just give the end user the device. So it's shrink wrapped, it's in the Apple box, it's no one's touched it, and the end user is the first person to touch that device, and then they enroll and go through the onboarding experience and they complete platform single sign-on. Iris is going to delight everyone soon with platform single sign-on in Setup Assistant. So that will be just this incredible experience for the end user, that they get their brand new device, they go through the out-of-box experience, and by the time they get to their desktop, all of their identities and encryption and compliance and everything is configured on the Mac, and it's in it's secure and it's registered correctly with Entra. So I think you might be able to do that thing that you're describing of having IT do something and then the user, but I'd strongly recommend not doing that.
Yeah, totally agree with what Neil said on the platform SSO. And what we have, the one we just went GA with for the PSSO right now, is completely post-enrollment experience. So the end user will be having a pop-up window on the side of the macOS device to remind them to do the PSSO right after the enrollment and right after their first login to the device. So that is where the first interaction for end user with the PSSO will be. And we highly recommend just leveraging that for now. And at the meantime, we're looking for the solution for during the Setup Assistant, which is the new one that Apple just released for 26. And we are really excited for that and looking into it right now.
And I will say that Apple have been great with that. That was the number one feedback we heard from platform single sign-on, was that end users forget or don't see the notification to start that onboarding flow. And that leads you to all kinds of weird scenarios where the device isn't registered in Entra and the end user's trying to launch applications and things like this. Apple providing that capability in Setup Assistant just solves 90% of the pushback and the issues that we've heard from end users. So it's a really great thing.
And I know some people. Sorry, go ahead, Iris.
Oh no, sorry. I'm just saying that I think 100% that right now the experience there, we have been seeing some cases, as Neil described, that the end user ignored the notification and the PSSO did not move forward. So PSSO on one hand is convenience, right? Because PSSO can help reduce the number of times the end user need to log in to the same credential. But on the other hand, it's really the security foundation underneath. And that's why it's really critical. And we appreciate all of your effort as IT admin to push that to the end user when using the device. And at the same time, we will see that Apple is really at full core of supporting the PSSO, the better experience for that.
I was just going to say, I know there are some groups out there using pre-provisioning on Windows with Autopilot, and this is going to be a little bit of change for your end users. But as Neil and Iris said, hopefully we'll at least get it into Setup Assistant soon, and it'll be a little bit better flow, and you'll get that appeal of opening that brand new box. So our next question is, are there plans to have filter support for DDM policies, especially for update management for macOS?
Do you want to take this one on, Iris?
Yeah, I will talk a little bit about, and Neil, feel free to add more info about it. Well, first, DDM has been of our top priority for several years. So we have a whole kind of roadmap out there. In the past, we have been working on the DDM software update, and DDM filter has been on the roadmap for one of my coworker, Ben has been working on it. So I don't have a specific timeline, but I want to just affirm that we are actively looking into it, to the filter support, and we understand the use cases of you using it for especially for assignment purposes. And I will probably pass on to Neil to add more details.
I was just going to add one of the issues with this, and I say issues, it's a typical engineering problem is that we've got filters in Intune, and that's what everybody's asking for. But DDM provides predicates, and that's kind of what one of the issues, right? Is that we'd rather use the predicates that Apple have built natively into DDM that we can use. So the predicates allow you to define, a set of rules, and essentially you put the policies down to all of your devices, and those predicates define which ones get applied where. That's really, really clever, and a really great way of handling that. So if the attributes change on the device and all of a sudden that policy should get applied, it will get applied quickly without Intune having to do anything. It's a real great benefit of DDM. But in parallel to that, we've kind of got this feature, right? So we're stuck in this kind of discussion internally about, well, which one of these things do we do, and do we do one first and then the second? So it is absolutely being discussed. Ben is up to speed and is all over this particular one. So just hold on for a little longer until we can get at least one or the other of these things out. So
Awesome. Charlotte, I think this one's for you. What kind of controls are available in Intune for OEM-specific features for Android devices?
That's a great question. So we currently support OEM config for Android in Intune. So what OEM config does is that it allows you to deploy an OEM-specific app to your device, and the OEM through Intune can set certain settings, for example, block screen capture just for their devices. And you can use Intune to set those settings that the OEM specified in OEM config. Where you can find OEM config is actually in the device configurations tab under Android Enterprise, and there's an OEM config line for that specifically. So if you go there, you can find a bunch of different OEM config apps that OEMs have published in the past, and then use those OEM config apps to toggle and to navigate settings and to configure certain settings specific to that OEM. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks, Charlotte. For our next question, is it now possible to block non-managed Apple IDs from logging into a supervised Mac device? Apple had previously announced that they would give us a solution on the MDM front that enables that.
this is where we need Ben. We need Ben, don't we, Iris?
Exactly. We need Ben to be here. But I think all of the questions here are hitting on our roadmap. We are actively working on one of the features, Get Token, which is a ability provided by Apple for just achieving the ask that kind of describing the question for blocking the non-managed Apple ID. So hopefully we can get that feature ready for you, so you will be able to leverage that for the blocking the non-managed Apple ID for all the devices you're working on. Right now, I think it's on a pretty good shape, and so hopefully can get it to you by early next year for that feature.
This has been a really common one. I see this across Mac and iOS at the moment, where customers want to provide capabilities to use some of the native Apple apps, but they don't want people to use personal accounts on those apps. So supporting the I'm going to get wrong with this. It was the managed Apple IDs, and now they're managed Apple accounts. Is that right? I know they changed the name, but it's
Yeah.
it's a really common question.
Awesome. Thank you. And as we go, don't be shy and go to aka.ms/Intune feedback to keep sharing questions and upvoting ideas. And you can ask questions at aka.ms/AMA/Intune crossplat. Our next question is from Aaron. What's the best way for an org to support platform SSO for a Mac using secure enclave keys in a multi-user environment? And can we still offer software on demand? Company portal, I read, isn't supported for multi-user.
This is a super complicated area for us. Multi-user devices for Mac management is really difficult for us to support, especially with platform single sign-on and user affinity. We have this problem across all of our platforms as well, so we have this issue with Windows too. You can kind of do this if you enroll without affinity, but there's a lot of manual steps to make this behave, and like you mentioned as well, having the company portal handling on-demand software for those users is very difficult. You only end up with a single user channel. So when you're managing the Mac, you have two channels, normally the device channel and the user channel, and you can only ever have one user channel and one device channel. So the first user that enrolls that Mac, they're kind of is tied to their account, right? So they're the I guess the owner of that, and then all the other users that may be on there, they become secondary, and that gets really complicated for things like conditional access as well. So if you look around, you'll find ways to make this behave, or to make it work to a degree with Mac management and platform single sign-on. I don't think you'll get company portal to behave very well for the on-demand software, but there are blogs out there that talk you through how to do this with enrolling without affinity and the platform single sign-on payload that you need to make that work. But it is quite complicated. It's not a super easy thing to do.
Yeah, I think as Neil said, there's because of the kind of infrastructure underneath that we separated the user channel and the device channel. So for platform SSO, it's mainly under the user affinity category, and the enroll without user affinity category is kind of considered as two separate things within the Intune infrastructure. Even though it is not as straightforward to make the scenario that described in the question working at this point, I think just finding the feedback and to let us know, and so we can keep track of this. And when we plan in the future for, let's say, for platform SSO for multi-user device, then we'll have more evidence that coming from you directly, so we can take into consideration for the significance of it. So any feedback that is filing through the official channel would be really appreciated.
It's really common in education. We see lots of these shared devices, and if you do a search, I think Scott Breen's done some blogs on this. So, and you can use platform single sign-on to allow you to sign in with the Entra credentials. So you kind of can make it work, but there's just a lot. You need to do quite a lot of configuration to get it to behave, and then the next users can kind of sign in afterwards. So non-trivial, but Scott's done some quite cool blogs on this.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another macOS question. Is there a way to sequence app installs for macOS, and or is there a way or roadmap item for a script that is running on the Mac to call back to Intune to request an app to be installed?
Yeah, I mean, Neil, I feel again they're hitting on our roadmap and all of the features we have been thinking about. Customers are thinking about the same thing. I think that the question sounds like two parts. I can talk more about the first part for the sequencing one. We recently released a fix for the Intune sidecar, Intune agent channel. It includes all of the apps, includes all of the scripts, and includes all of the policies. So it's already, there's an alphanumeric ordering that is available for all of our devices that has those three types of things sending down from the Intune agent channel. So, which means right now, your device must be we already currently on flighting, which means 20% of our customers already received that, and we plan to expand to more customers. So if you're not on the 20% yet, you will probably see it in the coming month for that, which means when you are deploying all of those three categories of the apps, policies, and scripts, those are sent down via their names alphanumeric order, which will for sure help on partially of the sequencing and to better experience for that. And on the other hand, we are also in the process of thinking more about a better together scenario of the sequencing that can make the cross-platform experience better. We know that Windows already have some sequencing that already provided to our Intune customer. So Mac and all of the Apple devices, we are talking actively catching up with Windows team on how we can release a feature for sequencing that is better for all of the experience for all of the Intune platform. So those are the updates for the sequencing part. And I will pass on to Neil, probably can talk more about the second part of the question, which
Thank
I think
you.
it was the script part.
So yeah, we have an API, we have a Graph API, and you can call back to that Graph API and make it do things. The issue is always in authentication back to that. So to do that, you need tokens to handle that. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. It's just that token needs to live somewhere on the device, and you need to kind of have the permissions to do that. And normally, end users you only have a certain level of permissions. So it's kind of possible, although it's not really common within Intune. We don't see that a great deal. Instead, what we would typically do is, rather than have one app running and then that calling another and that calling another, if we had a scenario where we had, let's say we had like 4 PKGs that we really needed to deploy, and they needed to deploy in order, we would just put them in one PKG and have a post install script that ran the installer. So we would kind of chain them and do them that way. We do keep discussing kind of orchestration and these kinds of things. It's something that comes up and we talk about it. And then, it's a really interesting area. We have the same kinds of conversations from Config Manager to Intune as we do from kind of like boxed Mac management products like Jamf over to Intune too. So yeah, we don't have a similar way of doing that in Intune today, but it is a really common conversation area for us.
Thank you, Neil and Iris. And with all the Mac questions, I just want to remind everybody, we do have a LinkedIn community for Mac, and it is aka.ms/macadmins. And everyone is encouraged to join and collaborate with other Mac admins using Intune. And Neil, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, well, I'll say 2 things on that. The first thing is that when Arnab and I had this idea for a Mac community, we thought maybe 100 or 200 people would join us, and I think it's over 5,000 now, and it's really busy. And the second is that we had criticism at one stage saying, "Oh, well, it's like you own it, Microsoft own it, and it will all be just like a marketing thing," and it isn't. It's the feedback there is pretty critical, and it's great. It's as product managers, it's how it's the lifeblood, right? You need those kind of critical feedback areas to grow and to know the right things to build. I mean, sort of Charlotte and Iris and I, none of us are managing devices. That's not our day job. So that kind of feedback that we get from that community It's excellent. It's normally the number one place that we see, sort of Iris and I will see that something isn't working. So if there's a problem somewhere, or there's something that we need to be aware of, that's a really great place to see that. And also, if you have, if we're discussing an idea or a feature and we think, oh, maybe this would work or maybe that would work, again, just skimming through that community, you just get this wealth of experience from the community of, perhaps educating us on how to think about what we're building. So yeah, it's a great community, and there's tons of really clever people there, lots of MVPs, and our competitors are there. I mean, everybody's in there. It's quite a good community.
Yeah, so it's mainly the first thing I wake up and check every day, just to check what's going on in the community. And sometimes I receive the message from Neil say, "Oh, Iris, this one, take a look at this LinkedIn post, and this one is working, or this is great feedback." So that's just the best part of having that admin community, and we can be the first responder, quote unquote, too.
Awesome. And if you can't find what you're looking for in the Mac admin community, we do have the blog that Iris mentioned earlier about Mac migrations. It is at aka.ms/intune/Apple migration OS 26.
Thank you, Susan.
So our next question is from LinkedIn. One major challenge of managing iOS devices in Intune is that using the company portal works fine, but handling both corporate and BYOD devices, especially with SSO, can be particularly tricky. Do you have any tips?
Do you want me to take this one, Iris?
Sure, yeah, I can add more later.
Cool. So there's just been some changes to the way we do this from our Entra team. So previously, you could enroll your iOS devices with company portal and register them into Entra. They've just changed that, and now you need to use the SSO extension to do that. And that's all around using the Secure Enclave. It's all about getting those credentials into the kind of the hardware-backed Secure Enclave on the device. Apple has always had their corporate side pretty well nailed with ADE, so their kind of automated device enrollment flow. So that's, the device is an Apple Business Manager, and it comes through and it's supervised, and we get this huge list of capabilities and features. And then the rest of that story has often caused confusion with customers, especially around BYO and personal devices. So we see three ways of doing that on iOS at the moment. The one I often recommend to customers to begin with is actually nothing to do with device management, and that's using our mobile application management story. So that's application protection policies from Intune. They work on Android too, and that is if you can meet your requirements using an application protection policy, your life is going to be so much easier immediately, right? You don't have to manage them particularly. You don't have to scale them. It protects and provides DLP, and it's a really great way of controlling your corporate data on a personal device. The reason that we like that is because you, as an organization, you don't inherit the risk of managing that device anymore. You can't accidentally wipe it, right? And then the second thing that you can do is you can enroll that device. You can MDM enroll these BYO devices. And there are two ways you can do it. You can use device management, so you can do device enrollment. When you do that, you don't get a supervised device, but you do get the ability to wipe it, right? So you get a bunch of capabilities and features that are not available to you anymore. So there's stuff that you get on supervised corporate devices that you don't get anymore. But one of the things that you can do is you can wipe that device. So you need to think really clearly before you go down that route. The other thing you can do is user enrollment, which is probably like my second favorite behind MAM, or behind application protection policies. So if you do user enrollment, you still get MDM controls, and you can push restrictions policies, and you can do a whole bunch of things to kind of control that device. The device actually gets carved into a bit like work profile, so that you get a separate file system, and the registration artifacts and things live in a separate keychain. So it's quite a cool solution. But the nice thing there is that if you accidentally try and wipe that device, it just removes the user portion and doesn't doesn't break the personal side. So like in order, I would say, corporate devices, always do Apple Business Manager and always do ADU. You get so many benefits there from like activation unlock and a bunch of capabilities and payloads. Migration is a great one too. So if corporate devices, make sure they go that way. For BYO devices, really consider using application protection policies rather than MDM. If you absolutely have to do MDM, try and meet that with UE first. And if you absolutely cannot do it with UE and you still have to do it, then the last resort is device enrollment. So that's kind of the way I think about it. So,
Iris, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think Neil covered a lot of details there, and also the three kind of layers. Start with MEM and then user enrollment. If none of that really meets the requirement, then think about the device enrollment part. And I think that's the general guideline we introduced there. And for MEM, if admin on the call is not familiar with that, it stands for mobile app management. So we also have documentation in our Intune that talks about what how MEM functions. So we'll highly recommend taking a look into the documentation, better understanding how only managing app can help in the BYOD scenario better, and probably share a lot of the just headaches the admins you're running into right now. So highly recommend just taking a look into the documentation that Intune provides.
It definitely also keeps your end users a little less nervous that they don't get the pop-up screen saying, your admin could wipe your device and they're my baby pictures. So definitely worth investigating.
Yeah, for both parties.
For both parties. Our next question comes from Tech Community. Are there any plans for a way to set and forget minor updates for macOS devices? Right now, we can only set a specific date, which means that we have to monitor the releases, set and update our current policies with a new date, and we would like to have the same thing that we have for autopilot for cumulative updates, deferral, deadline based on number of days, things like that.
This is another one where we wish we got Ben, I think.
Yeah,
Ben
for this one.
Ben on the team he's been doing hackathon projects and all kinds of things, trying to figure out how we can make maximum use of the payloads that Apple provides us. You will have noticed that we provide support for latest in there. So that was something that Ben came up with, which is really, really cool. But it's latest version, not latest minor version. So it does, if you get a major version, we'll take you to that one too. I think Ben's been trying to figure out how to implement rings as well. So try to come up with ways to still use the same payloads. Obviously, we're restricted to the payloads that Apple provides, and we need to make best use of those. But yeah, there is a lot of active thinking in how we can make better use of the data that Apple provides and the DDM payload that we have, and try to be creative with that. So I've got no idea what the timelines of this look like, but rest assured there's a like an active discussion happening behind the scenes on this one to see how creative we can be.
And definitely, if this was your question or you're also interested in this, feel free to comment in the tech community with maybe more specifics so we can think about those things as we're planning. More details always helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
Charlotte, our next question is for you. Can you share tips on building effective Android device restriction policies in Intune? Not just how, but what types are good to set?
That's a great question. Of course, this will be dependent kind of on your organization's needs and kind of wants around device management, but Intune provides two major ways of setting device configuration policies. So number one would be settings catalog. It's actually pretty new. We just started supporting settings catalog this year. And then number two would be templates, which is kind of the old way of setting device restriction policies. The benefit of using settings catalog is that it's easy to duplicate policies. You can easily search for settings. You don't have to do Control F, but we have a search bar and everything. And it's just a nicer kind of admin experience to set it in Settings Catalog. And all our new settings are also being added through Settings Catalog. So if you're ever trying to find a very new setting hot off the press, I would go to Settings Catalog and take a look there. And then, yes, there are many different device restriction profile settings that you can set, from screen capture to VPN to Wi-Fi to application settings. So a lot to look through, and it kind of depends on what your end goal is for your organization. How secure do you want it to be? Of course, there's always a kind of trade-off of secure versus actually still having being able to use the device, being able to access all the apps and everything you need. So kind of weighing that trade-off is always important when setting device restriction policies. So yeah, I would say those are my two recommendations. And then I can also try to find the aka.ms link for you for Settings Catalog information. There it is. It's aka.ms Settings Catalog Android. Just take a look at it. Take a look at the settings we now support in Settings Catalog, and try it out. Try to use it. And if you can't find a setting there, you might be able to find it in templates. So I would also look there. Yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte. For our next question from Tech Community, since we did just talk about MAM, when you're using MAM without enrollment with app protection policies, is there a way to require Microsoft Defender to be not just installed, but also have check for harmful links enabled? Might be a little out of our.
I don't know. I know we can. Check for Defender being present and onboarded, but I don't know whether we can be any more specific. And we're just about to bring that capability to Mac too. So the machine risk score is coming to Mac soon. I know people have heard me say that before, but we are actually going to do it in the next few months, which is great. But yeah, I don't know what control we have over configuring Defender on an unmanaged device. So that would be one for our Defender colleagues, I think.
And we do actually also have a policy AMA next, right after this. That's at aka.ms/AMA/Intune management. And we can have that question again then. Okay. Our next question is, will device name template for macOS be available at some point outside of supervised devices?
I'll take this one because I had Anya and I spent weeks with this. So the answer is no to this one, and the reason no is because the device naming payload is part of the ADE, so it's part of the setup assistant payloads that we deploy. The way we can do that today is because that payload gets deployed and then the device gets renamed as it goes through setup assistant, and we don't get that capability outside of ADE enrolled devices. What most customers do is we have a template script that will do this. So all you then do, and in fact it's really common even in ADE to use the script to do that. And the reason using a script is helpful is because you can be really creative in how you do that. So we can start to interrogate things about the device that perhaps Intune wouldn't know necessarily. So we can find out, where the device is and which network it's on, and we can even take, we'll have customers will do database queries and things based on the serial number to get things back, but you can do all kinds of clever things there. So with the model number and the sample script we have on our GitHub repo has a bunch of art of the possible examples in there. So although we can do it in setup assistant, my experience is it's actually most commonly done by a shell script, even for ADE and for BYO2.
Awesome, thank you, Neil. Our next question: are there any plans to incorporate side loading of Android apps, particularly for Android Enterprise dedicated enrolled devices? There are a large number of companies, particularly in manufacturing and warehouse management, where leveraging a managed Google Play Store methodology is either not available or not flexible enough to support a controlled deployment strategy.
That's a great question. And I think we've heard feedback around that from other customers as well. We are actually currently working on a solution to support direct Intune management of line of business apps. We unfortunately don't have more to share for now, but be on the lookout. And as always, thank you for the feedback. It's definitely noted, and we're working hard on delivering capabilities around it. Yeah.
I definitely know that has been an ask for a while. So since this and our next AMA are both an hour long, we're going to wrap with a few final tips, and then we'll give you time to take a quick break before the next AMA. So Iris, do you have anything you want to close out with for final tips or tricks?
Yeah, I think for Apple, and I first really appreciate all the questions here, and I'm really glad to see a lot of questions mentioned in this AMA session is aligned with our roadmap, which is coming after also what we have been released. So I just want to close out say that all of the PSSO related question, we fully recognize that is top of our priority, and DDM is also top of our roadmap, and you will see more in the coming quarters from what we can release to you. And in the meantime, just keep the great work and finding the feedback to us, so we'll be able to keep on the top of your feedback and making sure all of your evidence is included in our future feature planning.
So as I was saying, if you have feedback, we do have aka.ms/Intune feedback. Charlotte, do you have anything top of mind, tips and tricks you want to share as we wrap up?
No, just thank you to everybody in the community for the great questions and the awesome feedback. And I'll definitely keep it noted for all the Android feedback we got. And yeah, hopefully you can see some of the requests realized. Yeah.
And Neil.
Oh, crikey. I think for me, the top tip of working with customers, or seeing those that are, I guess, successful and those that may be a little bit less so. The thing that always stands out to me is that when you're taking a different product to manage your devices, it's a good time to rethink what you actually need to do. Especially on the Windows side. And Mac too, we've got decades worth of legacy here. Some of the decisions that we took a decade or more ago may not still be appropriate, right? And there may be a better way to think about that. So, and it's not that that there might be a better or a different payload at that level, but it's really time to rethink how you deliver your devices and how you meet the demands of your business, right? Because they've changed. The demands that were placed upon us 10 years or 20 years ago, or even longer, are different now. So, if you're going through that process of thinking about cloud native for Windows, or you're looking at Mac, so the cloud native equivalent for Mac would be Intune. So you're looking at Intune management of your Macs. Don't just take the payloads and configuration policies and copy them across. Spend the time to really think about how you can be more agile and set yourself up for the next 10 years rather than just do what you did 10 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the questions. And we hope to see you on the next session, which is Security Policy and Endpoint Management, starting at 9:30 Pacific at aka.ms/AMA/Intune Management. Thanks, everyone.